The County Council wants state lawmakers to be more transparent. The Council's Governmental Relations and Economic Development Committee advanced a resolution requesting the state legislature make itself subject to the Sunshine Law. Unlike the County Council, the state legislature is exempt from the open meeting requirements and sanctions.
We'll start here with Ms. Harden.
Corey Harden, speaking for myself, in support of Resolution 295 about a sunshine law for the state legislature. I'd like to thank Valerie Poindexter for introducing this resolution. Lack of sunshine isn't serving us well. It just enabled state legislators to ram through $2.4 billion for the rail bill, the railroaded bill. They debated and voted in secret. They held no hearings on neighbor islands, and when neighbor island legislators tried to speak up, they were treated shabbily. And now neighbor islands will pay for a boondoggle that should not have been built and will benefit few of us. 2 years ago, another bill started out as a renewable fuel tax credit bill. But in the final days of the legislature, lawmakers did gut and replace. That wiped out everything in the bill and replaced it with new language. And it became an organic food tax credit bill and was passed with 0 public hearings. It got the Rusty Scapel Award from Common Cause Hawaii and the League of Women Voters. That's an award for bills that are drastically changed with little chance for input from the public and legislators. And shenanigans like this are standard practice at the legislature, but they are not democracy. So the neighbor islands are speaking up. Kauai and Maui passed sunshine resolutions unanimously. And like our resolution, they quote a state law that says opening up governmental processes to public scrutiny and participation is the only viable and reasonable method of protecting the public's interest. But to have sunshine at the legislature, we might need other changes, like spacing out the session through the year as the Council and Congress do, so there's time for thorough review and public input. Term limits for lawmakers, as proposed by Senator Ruderman in 2016. We should have limits on the number of bills. In 2017, about 3,000 bills were introduced, but only about 200 passed. There's no way you can look at 3,000 bills. Might have rotating committee chair positions, so one chair can't block a bill year after year. And we need video testimony from neighbor islands. Vested interests will fight this tooth and nail, but elections are fast approaching. We can ask state candidates why they require counties, boards, and commissions to have open proceedings, and then they go cut their deals in secret. These deals lead to inequality and division, but with sunshine we have collective wisdom and wiser decisions that people can live with. Thank you.
This morning we had Brenda Ford in support of Resolution 295.
Transparency in government is vital to democracy. It does slow down the process, but it's still necessary for the people to understand what is going on. It results in an informed public, and that informed public can be educated and become, excuse me for my allergies, a voter base of informed citizens who can hopefully vote for people who will do their very best to represent the people. That's what democracy is about, representing the people. Just as importantly, we need to know what our elected officials are doing, why they are doing it, and most importantly, for whom they are doing it. If they're doing it for us, that's great. If they're not doing it for us, we need to know about it, and we need to replace people who do not represent us. No one is going to agree 100% of the time with any person who is an elected official. But it is the public's right to know what that official is doing, and it should not be taking place behind closed doors. I urge you to join the other outer islands and pass this unanimously. Thank you. I apologize for my allergies again.
Scott, can you give Brenda some water? Thanks for your testimony, Brenda.
Go ahead. No. Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate you bringing this forward and letting the legislature know that we're trying to watch. It brings me back to a time when this county did not have sunshine law, where the body that you now serve on would make its decision, come out, announce it, and then take public testimony. Those days have passed. Those days need to pass for the state legislature as well. As Corey Hardin did as always, an excellent job of describing the situation. The government is certainly not serving our interest in disclosing its actions and the reasons for its actions. The Sunshine Law is a cure for that. Thank you for bringing this up, and I hope you pass it unanimously.
Thank you.
It is absolutely necessary to have openness and transparency in government. Here we have the state legislature mandating it to the counties, and they won't do it for themselves. Well, I believe that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And so I am very glad that you have brought this forward. I don't expect that the state legislature is going to like it very much any more than they would like a resolution asking them to reduce their salaries. But at the same time, the discussion needs to get started in order to get the groundswell that will eventually force them to pass it. And so thank you very much, and I hope that you will all support this first step.
The second thing that I've encountered was a deep frustration, especially with the last session, especially with the rail special session, on the lack of transparency in the legislature. I think that these two things are connected. And if we want to have a more engaged public, we need to have a more informed public. And whether or not this is the best approach, I don't know. Whether or not the legislature will agree to it, I think it's highly unlikely. But I think it's very important to start this discussion. We need more transparency in the process in terms of how bills are voted on, who votes on them, what discussions happen behind them. I know that the voters are concerned, why did the rat lung worm bill fail? Why did the 2045 clean transportation bill fail? All of this happened behind closed doors, and the voters are frustrated not knowing what happened. So I encourage you to support this bill. I think with the public having better information, the public becomes more engaged, and when the public are more engaged, we have a better democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mahalo for your testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to testify that hasn't testified?
Resolution 295-17 requests that the Hawaii State Legislature amend Chapter 92 of the Hawaii Revised Statutes to require itself to be subject to the Sunshine Law. Requests the state legislator to remove exemptions in state law for open meeting requirements, enforcement, penalties, and sanctions so that the state legislature would be subject to the complete provisions of the Sunshine Law. Reference Communication 453, introduced by Ms. Poindexter.
The resolution itself is self-explanatory, and we heard from the testifiers about openness and transparency. The public, I always believe, has the right to hear what our deliberations are and how we came to the decision to vote the way we vote. Kauai had theirs passed, and so did Maui. On Kauai's resolution, I did submit testimony supporting it, and I quoted the Oklahoma court's decision in Oklahoma. It was the Oklahoma Association of Municipal Attorneys versus the state, 1978. It says, gives a clear statement of why open meetings are important. And I quote, if an informed citizenry is to meaningfully participate in government, or at least understand why government acts affecting their daily lives are taken, the process of decision-making, as well as the end results, must be conducted in full view of the governed. And this was a Oklahoma court's decision. I believe that Hawaii, our state legislature, should be open to looking at complying with the Sunshine Law. The special session was a clear statement in itself because there were no public hearings, there was nothing. There was no advance warning that this was coming up, and we were called at the very last moment for them to tell us what they had already decided. And I asked in that special meeting that we had, a private meeting with our Senate President and the House Speaker and Sylvia Luke, and I think the transportation person was also in there. And it was like it was a done deal. And yet we had not even begun public testimony. So I just felt that the deals were made. When they call recess, they go into caucus. That caucus should be in open public forum so that we know what they're discussing. It's like something comes up and somebody does an amendment. Oh, immediately recess and we'll go back into closed doors and caucus. And nobody knows what they're talking about. Then they come out and they have these decisions already made. And I feel as a voter, and even me just personally as a voter, even if I wasn't sitting here as a council member, I think I have the right to know what the person that I put in office is deliberating on my behalf. So I got many, many calls. We know that social media was going crazy. I was part of it as well. So putting this on the table, and I hope you can all support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Poindexter.
I just want to thank Ms. Poindexter for bringing this forth. I think it's very pertinent, and it's been too long already that we haven't addressed this. And one of the things the testifiers brought up was the issue of these gut and replaces that happen so frequently, and what ends up getting passed is something completely different from what the public thought it was. And I'm consistently surprised by the lack of transparency, especially when they're making decisions that personally affect all of us in our day-to-day lives. And then they're having these discussions behind closed doors. And as a constituent, I'd like to know what my representative is saying. And so, the lack of transparency, it's disempowering to voters. It's discouraging to voters, to public bystanders who care about the issues. We have a hard enough time getting the public to care. It's a basic pillar of public process, and it's important to be transparent when making decisions that affect everyone. So thank you for bringing this forth. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to also thank Ms. Poindexter for bringing this very timely resolution before us, and I do support it 100%. And what I'd like to kind of clarify is what Ms. Ruggles says. During the legislative process, I want to thank our legislative research branch because many times, if we find something that we want to either support or not support, we do not have adequate time to submit testimony. I mean, it has to be done so quickly that if not for our legislative research branch that actually screens things that are that relate to Hawaii County business, we would probably miss our opportunity to submit testimony one way or another. So the turnaround time is so fast that I think we're handicapped in that way also, in responding adequately to things that are going to have a big impact on this county. So that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to thank our research branch staff and also Ms. Poindexter, and I support this resolution. I yield. Mahalo.
Yes, I too support this. I'm a firm believer in public participation in government, and although democracy can get messy and drawn out at times because we do have the ability for the public to engage, I think that we have to do all we can to encourage that. And I'd like to thank the Maui County Council and the Kauai County Council for taking the initiative to pass resolutions similar to this one, and thank Ms. Poindexter for bringing this forward. I know it's going to be tough to get the legislature to take a step towards abiding by the Sunshine Law, but I think that would be a good conversation to open and see where that can go. So I'll support this because I do want to support the public's interest in the formation of public policy, and I think we need to encourage that. Thank you.
I do support this bill, and I really appreciate that Ms. Poindexter has submitted it for our consideration. I actually did work recently at the state legislature for a couple months, and not for a long time, but I got to observe firsthand how these backdoor meetings take place. And with all due respect, it happens with great arrogance. And no one is aware of the results of those meetings. So it's something that I was able to view and see how it disrupts the integrity of the legislative process. The other thing, I mean, there's many things with the manner in which our state legislature operates that disadvantages us, as Ms. David pointed out, the timing of testimony, the requirements for timing of testimony, and the fact that we have no way to do remote testimony in virtually all of the committees at the state legislature. So as Outer Island constituents, we don't get to have the same voice in state government. And I think it's really important to rein this process in and ensure that it's done with integrity and transparency. I, too, don't feel that the legislature will respond to these resolutions from the various counties. I'm glad that we're doing this because it does bring up the discussion, but I don't know that this will force anyone's hand. So I'm sorry we can't take a measure that is more strong and maybe collectively hold hands at the county level to try and enforce this issue further, because it is a very important one. So thank you.
I was actually a little concerned, though, in the resolution at the very end, Ms. Poindexter, you've identified Ron Kouchi, the Senate President, Speaker of the House, and mentioned all of our representatives, but none of our senators. And I was just trying to understand why you identified all of the House members, but not our Senate members. And, you know, I support this, but if we're going to do it, I think everybody should know, including our senators. And if it's a possibility to add them in.
I don't know why it was removed or anything. I thought we had it in.
No,
I'll
yeah.
check on that. So when it goes to council,
Yeah.
I'll have that changes made, or I don't know the reason why it maybe
Yeah.
have taken out, that I'll know. But I apologize for not catching that here. But at the first draft, I know we had all of our senators here in the island.
And that's great.
Yeah.
And sometimes the protocol is it goes to the speaker and then
Yeah.
they run it down, you know, to all
But
the
I'll double
members.
check on that,
But
so-
I just know that if we singled them out
Right.
individually, you know, I think it would go a little further, and, you know, like death by paper cuts,
Yeah.
this stuff.
Yeah.
It really is hard to really have them.
Yeah, and I
make a
apologize, 'cause
meaningful
I
change.
thought I had that in, and, you know, at that time, my legislative aide was on vacation, so I did this kind of on my own, and I thought I had it in, and so when I was gone and it passed and it came through my aide, then we put it through. But again, I'll double check what the process was. Maybe they had a reason for removing it. So, thank you for bringing that up.
Mr. Richards?
Again, interest of time, ditto. But as well, I'll use our report that you gave us with the attached PowerPoint as a example of reasoning why we need to support, and I definitely support.
You know, I'm going to cast my vote in favor of this measure just as a, I guess, a gesture of solidarity with my colleagues. But I've got some real big concerns about this. It's not, you know, significant concerns. You know, I'd throw my vote, you know, doesn't really matter to me. But practically speaking, I don't like interfering with other people's business, okay? and that's the state legislature. They call the shots over us. And if we're going to piss them off, they're just going to make life more difficult for us in the long run. Okay? I think Ms. O'Hara stated that, it's highly unlikely that they're going to pass or agree with these resolutions. So we're just heightening, it's almost like a provocation, in my opinion. But having said that, in the past, I've always thought to myself, and this is, over the last maybe 20 years, why is it that the legislature doesn't adhere to those same principles that they're making us adhere to? And I thought that was inherently unfair. But then over the years, my thinking has evolved. And I think most of you have recalled that oftentimes I've been advocating relaxation of the Sunshine Law as it pertains to our body. Because at times it cripples us. It cripples our ability to do the people's work. So on the one hand, we're saying, the people want to see us do their work. We need transparency for an informed electorate. But we have to balance that with effectiveness and timely decision making. I'll give you an example. And, again, this is a two-edged sword, but a lot of times we're asked to send testimony up to the legislature. And of course, because they do things in a wacky way, we only have a few days to react. But wouldn't it be good if we could just do minute resolutions, circulate something? If everyone agrees to it, we can send it up en masse. Everyone on this council agrees to it, and it can be ratified later on. We're not able to do that kind of stuff. We're not able to react as a body quick enough. So, I think we should be advocating for relaxation. I continue to do that. So how can I, on the one hand, say we have to have a relaxation for more effective decision-making on the council level, and then say that these guys should have strict adherence to the Sunshine Law, which, I hope you guys can understand my angst over here. There are other concerns, too. Ms. Harden brought up the fact that these guys are dealing with 3,000 bills a session. How in the hell are they going to manage 3,000 bills if they have to adhere to the Sunshine Law? That's crazy. There has to be a balance somewhere. I'm okay. I'm 100% in favor of transparency. I think if all of you know, many of us have advocated not even going into executive sessions. So don't get me wrong. I'm in favor of openness, but you have to balance that with the practicalities too. They're there only for about 4.5 months, I think. You have 51 members, I think, in the House, maybe 25 in the Senate. We only got 9, and we're having a hard time. How in the hell are they going to manage their affairs under those circumstances if they have to go strict adherence to the Sunshine Law? Very difficult. I'm concerned as a member of this state, as a member of the public who's relying on these guys to make good decisions. So, I've got some real big concerns. And let's really think about it. As far as I can recall, the only time I can ever remember this body over the last 3 years really hashing things out in public and having people change their mind was only one time during the Margaret Willie's ethics bill. People evolved over time. There were delays and everything. And at the very end, Miss Willie said, the final package was a better package than what was proposed earlier, because we all worked together. But really think about it. I cannot recall any time other than that where people have changed their votes. So, that's just a commentary. It might be a negative commentary about this body too, but I just have to state that. I am going to be voting in favor of it as a matter of solidarity, but I just think it's got to be tempered somewhat. And I wanted my statements to be put on the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Many other states are doing it. So what our state needs to go figure out is how are the other states doing it. It may be in committees that it's more lax, and then when it gets to the bigger, when they're in session, I don't know how they can, but I'm sure they can figure it out, because many other states are doing it, and our state should be doing it as well. And when we say our hands are tied, or their hands, are tied because this is just basically a resolution that has no force of law. But you know what? The voters, the people have the power. That's who has the power. So if your legislators, you believe that they're not doing the right thing, you have the power to put them in there or not. That is the power. The people have the power to do it. The other thing is punishment, and I agree, Councilmember Chung brought it up about, we're going to do something like this, and then we're going to get punished. And the reason why punishment takes place is because there is no sunshine law. So they get to caucus behind closed doors, and if you don't obey my command and you get out there and you vote against what we did, I'm not giving you CIP money. I'm not going to, as Sylvia Luke can say, hey, I'm going to award all of those who voted yes at the special session, and all who voted no, I'm not going to fund you. That's what the Sunshine Law does. It gives those people the power. So, and I'm just going to end with one quote from Jimi Hendrix. And he said, and of all people, Jimi Hendrix, well, everybody has something good to offer, right? He says, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, then the world will see peace. Thank you.
And thank you for the quote. I just wanted to address some of the points that Mr. Chung made. I too agree that the Sunshine Law, as it exists in the state of Hawaii, is too restrictive on the public bodies that are held to that law. And in particular, and we've discussed this publicly, and it's something that was part of the HSAC package, we have continued to ask the legislature to relax some of those constraints on us, such as the requirement that no more than 2 of us can attend a public meeting. And this is very onerous, in my opinion, because where do we find out about the issues facing the public but at public meetings? We cannot know in advance whether the outcome will lead to some sort of legislation at the county level before we go to the meetings often. And yet, that's what we're held to, and the state legislature is not. Now, simply, if they were to consider and adopt a Sunshine Law, there are different renditions of the Sunshine Law amongst the many states. And what we have here is, in my opinion, a little too restrictive, and it would be nice to see that relaxed, as Mr. Chung said. But I do think it should apply to all of the legislative bodies. And that's not going to fix some of the ineffective process-oriented kind of problems that our legislature has. For instance, Mr. Chung mentioned that 3,000 bills get introduced every session. Well, if you look through those bills, you'll find 10 or more bills that are expressly the same. They may be worded slightly different, but they're exactly the same. So that process in itself isn't going to be fixed by applying or not applying Sunshine Law. And so that's not going to address the inefficiencies of the legislative process as it's laid out in the state of Hawaii. But I still think that we should all be abiding by a Sunshine Law. I would like to see it relaxed in a couple regards. Like I said, the public meeting issue is one of them. And I think it should apply equally to all of our bodies, all of our legislative bodies. That's my point. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to echo what Ms. Poindexter said, during her last discussion. Basically, this is a democracy. The people will decide, and I know, maybe that flies in the face of some of my arguments because, you need an informed electorate, but ultimately they make the decisions. If they don't like how things are done, if it's so bad, they'll change it. And also, within the legislative bodies themselves, there could be change. If it's that bad, I don't know. I've never been up there. I've never worked up there. Only those people know. I mean, they're in the, the eye of the storm, so to speak. So, we're kind of really, we have to temper our statements, I think, when we're dealing with these guys. I wouldn't go so far as to say that we're going to get punished, but I did say that it's going to piss them off. Whether that translates into a punishment later on, I don't know, but it's going to anger them, I think, right? But change, if it's needed, change will come either through the electorate or within. Thank you.
Thank you. Continued discussion? Then I'll just end it with a few statements. Mahalo for bringing this up. Mahalo for continuing the discussion, what started with the other counties. I think this is definitely the result of what we saw this past special session. I agree that what we saw was not in the public's interest, especially how it was dealt with and decided upon. I agree with everybody's statement. There's a lot of issues that we do have with the Sunshine Law in terms of the meetings, going to public meetings where only 2 of us can go. If more than 2 of us go, then we have to, make all these statements and, really these aren't our meetings. We aren't deciding anything. We're there to listen and to educate ourselves. And how do we do that? We show up to these meetings. So I wish those would be dealt with by the legislature to give us more ability to go to these meetings. It was part of the HSAC package and didn't pass, obviously. I don't think anything passed in the HSAC package. But I absolutely agree that, transparency is key to a growing democracy. And I really think how the legislature is set up now makes it very difficult for them to abide by these sunshine laws. So I think if they're gonna make it, if they're gonna have to abide by sunshine law, they need to set up how they deal with their session differently. It's just not set up currently in a way that is conducive to following a lot of these sunshine laws. So, saying that, I thank you for doing this. I absolutely agree that this needs to move forward, and these discussions need to happen. I think we have these discussions all the time, but the result of what we saw this last special session really hurt. Not only us here as a councils, every council, but the people that were looking at this. So, mahalo, Ms. Poindexter, for bringing this up. I'll support it, and let's continue that conversation. I think definitely need to amend that section where to add the senators in there for the next council meeting. But saying that, let's move on and let's vote for this, or let's take a vote. Okay, all in favor of approving Resolution 295-17, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's 9 ayes, motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out.